In the dark void of space, a small research station on the outskirts of the galaxy had been quiet for months. The crew had been on routine patrol, monitoring distant planets, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. But one evening, as the sun set on the far side of the station, a strange signal was detected. It was faint, barely noticeable, and definitely not part of the usual cosmic noises. At first, the crew thought it was a glitch in the system. A simple mistake. But something in the signal caught their attention. It was a distress call, coded in an ancient language, yet its urgency was unmistakable. The station's chief technician, Sarah, listened carefully as the words echoed through the communication system. Her heart raced as she realized what it meant. This wasn't just a signal, it was a cry for help. But who could be sending it? The galaxy was vast, and this signal was coming from a place few had ever ventured. The captain, a seasoned officer named Reynolds, quickly called a meeting with his senior crew members. They gathered around the holographic table, the glow from their data pads reflecting in their eyes. The distress signal had come from a planet on the edge of the galaxy, far from any known human colony. No one had ever mapped that region of space. No one knew what was out there. The possibilities were endless, and most of them terrifying. Sarah analyzed the signal for hours. It was weak, and there was a lot of interference. But the more she listened, the more she understood. The message had been sent by someone, or something, in need of help. The desperation in the voice was unmistakable. It was unlike anything she had ever heard before. But what did it mean? And why had it taken so long for the signal to reach them? Captain Reynolds knew this could be a trap, or it could be the key to something much bigger. But he couldn't ignore it. He knew the risks, but the idea of saving lives, or discovering something new, was too tempting. He decided to send a team to investigate. As the crew prepared for the mission, tension hung in the air. No one knew what they would find. They had heard stories of abandoned worlds, of mysterious forces, of long-lost civilizations. But the crew was trained for the unknown. It was their job to face the dangers that lay in the dark corners of space. As the ship's engines powered up and the crew took their places, Sarah couldn't help but feel uneasy. There was something about the signal that didn't sit right with her. But it was too late to turn back now. The ship soared through the vast emptiness of space, heading towards the unknown. The closer they got to the planet, the more intense the signal became. It pulsed with an eerie rhythm, as if calling them, drawing them in. The crew was on edge, and every warning light that blinked on the ship seemed to add to the tension. They knew something was out there, but they didn't know what. Suddenly, a strange ripple of energy hit the ship. The signal grew stronger, but now it was accompanied by a powerful electromagnetic storm. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring throughout the control room. The crew scrambled to maintain control, but the storm was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The planet loomed ahead, shrouded in mist and shadow. The signal was now a constant, pulsing beacon, guiding them in. But as they descended toward the surface, the atmosphere grew thicker. The air was dense, almost suffocating. The sensors on the ship began to malfunction, and the crew could barely make out the shape of the planet below. As the ship touched down, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. The once quiet space around them now seemed full of unseen eyes. The signal had led them here, but what would they find? Would it be a rescue mission, or a deadly trap? Reynolds stood at the helm, his mind racing. He knew they were on the brink of something momentous, something that could change the fate of the galaxy. But as the crew prepared to disembark, he couldn't help but wonder, what was waiting for them on the surface? Would they be able to survive whatever lay ahead? And so, with the signal still echoing in the depths of space, the crew of the research station prepared to uncover the mystery that could change everything. The crew of the research station had barely recovered from the unsettling distress signal when Captain Reynolds made the difficult decision to call for backup. The unknown danger was too great for just one ship. There was no telling what they might be walking into on the mysterious planet, and he wasn't about to risk the lives of his crew. The decision to involve the fleet wasn't easy, many of the higher-ups had their doubts. The signal had been faint, and the planet was located in a region of space that hadn't been explored in centuries. Some thought it was a waste of time, but Reynolds was certain something important lay hidden out there. Back at the fleet's command center, Admiral Harris received the transmission. His brow furrowed as he listened to Reynolds' report. A distress signal from a long-lost planet? Harris muttered, his voice heavy with skepticism. We don't even know if the planet is habitable, let alone if there's anyone alive to rescue. But Reynolds' voice was firm. The signal was real, Admiral. And it's too urgent to ignore. I'm sending a team, but I need additional support. Harris sighed, knowing the risks of venturing into uncharted space. But his responsibility was to protect the galaxy, and if there was even a chance that this distress signal was from a living civilization, it could not be overlooked. Fine, Harris said. I'll send a fleet. But be prepared for anything. We don't know what we're up against. Within hours, a battle fleet was assembled, a powerful force with advanced ships and seasoned soldiers. The team that had already been sent to the planet was to meet up with the fleet in orbit, and together, they would explore the strange world below. This was not a standard rescue mission, it had turned into something much larger. But no one knew just how far-reaching the consequences of this decision might be. As the fleet made its way toward the planet, Reynolds and his crew aboard the smaller research vessel kept a watchful eye on the signals coming from the surface. The strange electromagnetic storm that had rattled their ship the previous day had only intensified. It was as if the planet itself was trying to push them away, to prevent them from landing. The crew couldn't help but feel that something powerful was stirring beneath the surface. The tension among the crew members was palpable. Many were anxious, and the scientist Sarah, who had been leading the investigation into the signal, couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The electromagnetic pulses they had encountered earlier were no coincidence. There was something ancient and dangerous about the planet, and no amount of technology could prepare them for what lay ahead. As the fleet approached the planet's orbit, a series of strange fluctuations began to appear in the communication systems. The signals from the surface were no longer clear, there were gaps in the transmission, sections where the words seemed distorted, and the eerie, rhythmic pulse had grown louder. It was like a heartbeat, strong and relentless, calling to them from below. The fleet's flagship, a colossal warship named the Titan, entered orbit first, its massive engines humming softly in the silence of space. The other ships followed closely behind, and the crew of the research vessel began to feel a surge of anticipation. They were no longer alone in this mission. The full might of the fleet was at their side. Ready for descent, Reynolds reported over the fleet-wide comms, his voice steady but filled with an underlying sense of urgency. We're going in. As the ships descended into the planet's atmosphere, the storm intensified even further. The skies were alive with lightning and strange electrical activity. The fleet sensors went haywire, unable to get a clear reading of the surface below. But the signal kept pulsing, an unrelenting guide leading them through the chaos. As the ships made their final descent, they passed through the thick clouds and finally glimpsed the surface of the planet. It was a barren, desolate landscape, frozen plains stretching for miles, broken by jagged mountains and dark valleys. It was clear that this planet had not been home to life for a very long time. The landscape was eerie and lifeless, and yet, the signal persisted. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The crew of the research vessel, along with the fleet's soldiers, landed on the surface, preparing to explore the planet. The atmosphere was harsh, and the cold bit at their exposed skin. As they made their way across the rocky terrain, a feeling of dread settled over them. The planet was ancient, too ancient, perhaps, for them to understand. Sarah felt the weight of the silence around her. There were no signs of life, no creatures or vegetation. Just emptiness. Yet the signal continued, pulsing louder with each passing moment. "What do you think?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice trembling. "Is this some kind of weapon?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice tense. But I have a feeling we're not just here to rescue people. Whatever made that signal, it's not a simple distress call. It's something far bigger. As the crew and soldiers moved forward, the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift slightly, as if something deep below was stirring. They had no idea that they were about to uncover something that could change the galaxy forever. The mystery was only deepening, and the crew had no choice but to press on, their curiosity driving them toward a fate they could not yet comprehend. The storm raged on as the crew trudged across the barren landscape of the planet. The freezing winds howled through the craggy rocks, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with strange energy. Every step felt heavy, as if the planet itself was resisting their presence. Yet, the signal pulsed relentlessly in the distance, drawing them closer. Sarah, the lead scientist, scanned the surroundings with a mix of caution and fascination. The signal was getting stronger, more distinct. They had reached the heart of it. Her mind raced with questions. How could something so powerful and ancient be hidden on a forgotten planet? Who had sent the message, and why had it taken so long to reach them? As the crew neared the coordinates, they saw something in the distance, a massive structure rising from the cracked earth. It wasn't a building, but something far more alien. The shape was both familiar and foreign, as if it was made by intelligent beings, but from a time long before humanity's rise. The edges shimmered with an unnatural glow, and the surface was covered with strange markings, like a language written in the stars. The crew stopped dead in their tracks. They had reached the source of the signal. But what stood before them was not the colony they had expected to find. This was something far more extraordinary. Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his hand resting on his blaster. The others followed, their weapons drawn and their eyes scanning the surroundings. The strange structure seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive, reacting to their presence. The air was thick with tension, and every creak of the ship behind them seemed louder than the last. No one spoke as they approached the massive structure, its size dwarfing even the largest warships in the fleet. Sarah was the first to speak. "What is this place?" she whispered, awe in her voice. "I don't know," Reynolds replied, his voice grim. "But we're about to find out." As they drew closer, the energy around them intensified. The electromagnetic storm above had caused constant interference with their communications, but the signal itself seemed to grow clearer as they approached the structure. It was almost as if the planet itself was trying to communicate with them, urging them to enter. The closer they got, the more the structure seemed to reveal itself. Its surface was smooth, with no windows or doors visible. It seemed to be made from a material that was unlike anything they had ever seen, a kind of dark, metallic substance that shimmered in the light of the storm. There was no obvious way in, but a strange sensation tugged at the crew's minds, urging them to step closer. Reynolds motioned for Sarah to take the lead. She stepped forward hesitantly, reaching out to touch the surface of the structure. As her fingers brushed against the cool metal, there was a sudden shift, a low hum filled the air, and a section of the structure slid open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. The crew froze, staring at the opening. Inside, there was a faint glow, casting long shadows across the walls. It was an invitation, a warning. Sarah glanced back at Reynolds, her face pale. "Are we really going in there?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We don't have much choice," Reynolds replied. "The signal led us here. Whatever is inside could hold the answers we need." Reluctantly, the crew filed into the dark chamber. Their footsteps echoed through the vast, empty space as they made their way deeper into the structure. The air inside was heavy, thick with the scent of something ancient and unknown. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly with an eerie light. It was clear that they weren't the first to explore this place, but whoever had been here before, had long since disappeared. As they moved further into the heart of the structure, the pulse of the signal became louder, almost deafening. It was coming from somewhere deeper inside. With every step, they could feel the power in the air, a force that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. They had entered something ancient, something that had been hidden for reasons they couldn't yet understand. Finally, they reached a large chamber, its ceiling so high that it disappeared into darkness. In the center of the room stood a massive object, its form obscured by shadows. The signal was coming from within. Sarah approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, she saw that the object was not just any artifact, it was a massive alien vessel, its sleek surface covered with intricate carvings and glowing patterns. The vessel seemed to be alive, pulsing with energy as if it were waiting for something. The crew could only stand in awe. This was not just a ship, it was a part of something far greater, something that had been hidden away for centuries, perhaps millennia. "This is it," Sarah whispered. "This is the source of the signal." Reynolds stepped forward, his mind racing. They had found the ship, but the questions were only multiplying. Who had built it? Why had it been left here? And most importantly, what kind of power did it possess? As the crew gathered around the vessel, there was a sudden shift in the air, a faint vibration that shook the entire structure. The object before them seemed to come to life, its lights flickering as though it were awakening from a long slumber. The planet itself seemed to hum in response, as if the very ground beneath them was reacting to the presence of the ship. They were on the brink of something extraordinary, something that could change everything. But just as they were about to make their next move, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a loud crash echoed from deep within the structure. The ship had awoken, but so had something else. The ground beneath their feet trembled again, this time with more intensity. The walls of the alien structure seemed to hum in response, vibrating as though the very core of the planet was shifting. The crew glanced nervously at each other, their weapons gripped tightly. Something was waking up deep within the heart of the structure. The energy in the air had changed, and it felt as though the planet itself was alive, reacting to their presence. Captain Reynolds motioned for his team to move back, his instincts screaming that they were about to face something far more dangerous than anything they had expected. The alien vessel before them was no longer just a passive object. It was alive, as if it were aware of their intrusion. The lights that had flickered on moments earlier now pulsed more brightly, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. "I don't like this," Sarah muttered under her breath, taking a cautious step back. "Something's wrong. This ship, it's not just a relic. It's part of something far bigger." Before anyone could respond, a loud metallic groan echoed through the chamber. The walls around them shifted, and a massive door, once hidden, slid open with a sharp screech. The crew froze, eyes wide with disbelief. A hidden passage was revealed, dark and foreboding, stretching deep into the bowels of the structure. The air felt colder now, as though something ancient was stirring beneath their feet. "This wasn't here before," one of the soldiers whispered, his voice shaking. Reynolds took a deep breath. "We're going down there. Stay sharp." With their weapons raised, the crew moved forward into the newly revealed tunnel. The passage was narrow, with jagged edges and walls that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The glow from their helmets cast long shadows, and the only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps as they descended deeper into the unknown. As they progressed, the passage opened up into another vast chamber, this one much larger than the previous. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and the walls were covered in strange markings, alien symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. At the center of the room stood a massive, cylindrical structure, its surface smooth and dark, as though it had been untouched for eons. Sarah stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. "This looks like some sort of control center," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The technology here is centuries ahead of anything we know." Captain Reynolds moved closer, inspecting the structure. It was covered in the same glowing symbols that were etched into the walls of the chamber. The device seemed to hum softly, as though waiting for someone to activate it. The signal they had been following had grown stronger with each step, and it was now pulsing in time with the vibrations coming from the central structure. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shook once more, and the air was filled with a deep, resonating hum. The structure before them seemed to come to life, its surface shifting as though it were responding to an unseen command. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and a low, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in an alien language. The crew froze, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. Sarah's heart raced as the ship's system seemed to spring to life. "It's activating," she said, her voice tense. "This ship, this is no ordinary artifact. It's a weapon that's been dormant for centuries." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "A weapon? What kind of weapon?" Before Sarah could answer, the ground trembled again, this time with such force that it knocked everyone off their feet. The walls of the chamber cracked, and a low rumble filled the air. The lights flickered, and the eerie hum grew louder. The crew struggled to regain their footing as the room seemed to shift around them. In the center of the chamber, the cylindrical structure opened with a loud hiss, revealing a series of intricate controls. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and the voice in the chamber spoke again, this time in a language that felt oddly familiar, though the meaning was still lost on them. Sarah's eyes widened as she studied the control panel. "This isn't just a weapon, it's a gateway," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's a portal, a way to travel between different points in the galaxy, or even other dimensions." Captain Reynolds stepped forward cautiously, his hand resting on his weapon. "A portal? To where?" Before Sarah could answer, the ground rumbled once more, this time with such intensity that the chamber seemed to shake apart. The alien structure was coming to life in ways they couldn't understand, and with it, the sense that something far more dangerous was awakening. "Whatever this is," Reynolds said, his voice grim, "we need to figure it out fast. This thing wasn't meant to be found. We're not the only ones looking for it." As the crew moved to investigate the newly revealed portal, they could hear the faint sounds of distant ships approaching from above. Someone else had discovered the planet's signal. Someone who might not have the same intentions as they did. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and it was clear that this was only the beginning. They were not alone, and what had been dormant for centuries was now awake, and it was hungry. The portal hummed with an eerie glow, its energy reverberating through the very air around them. The once dormant alien structure had come to life, and the vibrations beneath their feet were now constant, as though the planet itself was awakening from a long slumber. The crew stood in the center of the chamber, staring at the glowing gateway, unable to shake the feeling that something monumental was unfolding before them, something they were not prepared for. Captain Reynolds tightened his grip on his blaster, his eyes scanning the room. The cylindrical structure had opened to reveal a strange array of controls and displays, all alien in design, yet somehow familiar in their purpose. Sarah, still in shock from the revelations, had already begun examining the interface, trying to decipher the strange symbols that covered every inch of the control panel. "This is beyond anything we've ever seen," Sarah murmured, her voice filled with awe and fear. "This is not just a portal. It's a bridge. A bridge to somewhere, or someone." Reynolds took a step closer, his gaze fixed on the swirling energy in the center of the room. The portal seemed to pulse with life, each beat in perfect synchronization with the distant signal they had followed to this forsaken planet. It was as if the entire galaxy was calling them to this point, drawing them in. "We need to know what this is," Reynolds said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We've come this far, and we can't turn back now." Before Sarah could respond, a deep rumble filled the air. The ground beneath their feet shifted, and the walls of the chamber groaned as if they were about to collapse. The team instinctively reached for their weapons, their bodies tensing in anticipation. They weren't alone. A shadow appeared in the doorway. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber as a group of armed soldiers entered, their uniforms adorned with a symbol Reynolds didn't recognize. These were not the fleet's soldiers. These were something else, something far more dangerous. Their leader stepped forward, a tall figure with a cold, calculating stare. "You shouldn't have come here," the stranger said, his voice low and commanding. "This place is not for your kind." Reynolds' hand instinctively went to his sidearm. "Who are you?" The stranger's lips curled into a tight smile. We are the Keepers. And we have been watching this planet for millennia. You've activated something far beyond your understanding. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. You know what this is? What this portal does? The Keeper nodded, his eyes flickering with a strange mixture of admiration and warning. This is not just a relic. This is the key to a weapon that can change the fabric of the universe itself. You've awakened it, and now it will consume you. Reynolds stepped between the Keepers and his crew, his resolve hardening. You're not taking this ship. Whatever this is, we're taking it back to the fleet for analysis. The Keeper's eyes narrowed. You don't understand. This portal is not meant for human hands. It opens doors to places, and times, that no one should see. If you unleash its power, you will bring destruction to everything you know. The galaxy will fall, and there will be no turning back. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The soldiers behind the Keeper tightened their grip on their weapons, ready for a confrontation. But Reynolds remained calm, his mind racing with the implications of the Keeper's words. We're not letting you take this, Reynolds said, his voice firm. We're taking this to the fleet. We'll decide what to do with it. The Keeper's expression darkened. You do not have the power to decide. This weapon is not for your people. It is not for anyone. He motioned for his soldiers to advance. You've opened the gate. Now you must deal with the consequences. Without warning, the Keeper raised his hand, and the room suddenly shifted. The walls seemed to pulse with a new energy, and the floor beneath them cracked open. A blinding light poured from the portal, consuming everything in its path. The Keepers stepped forward, their weapons drawn and glowing with a strange energy. Get back! Reynolds shouted, motioning for his team to retreat. But it was too late. The ground around them buckled as a massive shockwave erupted from the portal. The energy was overwhelming, and the crew was thrown backward, slamming into the walls of the chamber. The blinding light filled the room, and for a moment, the crew was blinded, unable to see what was happening. As the light faded, they found themselves in a different place entirely. The chamber had disappeared, and they were no longer on the alien planet. Instead, they stood in the middle of a vast, desolate landscape, under a sky filled with swirling cosmic storms. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the ground was cracked and lifeless. The crew looked around in confusion. The Keeper's words echoed in their minds, You've opened the gate. Now you must deal with the consequences. Reynolds' heart raced. They had crossed a threshold, one they could never go back from. They had unlocked something that not only bridged space but time itself. And now, they were somewhere else, somewhere far beyond the known universe. We've made a terrible mistake, Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. We've opened a door we can't close. The crew stood at the edge of a new world, a world filled with untold dangers. But as they looked back at the swirling portal behind them, they realized that whatever lay beyond was not the end. It was only the beginning. The galaxy's fate was no longer in their hands. They had unleashed something far greater than they could have ever imagined, and now, they had to face the consequences. The galaxy was on the brink of destruction, and the crew of the research vessel had unknowingly become the key to its salvation, or its annihilation.